My name's Evan Holloway. I'm a 16-year-old nerd who, until recently, was wrestling with the typical trials of high school. Exams, future plans, bullies, first crushes. Just over 2 months ago, everything shifted. I experienced something I still can't comprehend. A werewolf, or something disturbingly similar, attacked me and my friend Ava in my own home. The full story of that night was posted here. Check the playlist or click the link in the description. Anyways, Ava and I were able to fight the beast off with nothing but desperation, dumb luck, and whatever we could grab for weapons, managing to hurt it enough to retreat into the night. Ava Moreno is, well, she's my friend and, if I'm honest, my crush since forever. She's beautiful, kind, sharp-tongued, smarter than she lets on, and somehow always ends up in trouble with me. We survived our encounter, just barely, and though we wounded the beast, we didn't finish it off. It slipped out unseen into the woods behind my house as the cops arrived, leaving Ava and me amid wreckage, adrenaline still flooding our veins. Since then, sleep has become fragile. Memories replay in the dark, and the beast's guttural roar and the stench of rot and scorched fur still haunt us. More than 2 months after that night, I could finally sleep without the lights on. Fortunately, my parents' insurance covered repairs, restoring our war-torn home and reinforcing security. My broken ankle had healed and I could walk and cycle again, though every now and then a dull ache reminded me of that dark, painful period of my life. Ava improved too. The haunted look eased, replaced with a quiet strength matching the bond forged in that night's aftermath. We didn't just survive. We grew closer, bound by trauma and the knowledge of what still prowled out there. In the aftermath of my werewolf encounter, I even began seeing an entirely new side of myself. I had always been the quiet kid who avoided drawing too much attention. Your typical nerd, basically. But since surviving that thing, I somehow feel more confident and motivated, eager to leave the trauma behind and better myself. I even started running and going to the gym. Then, fate decided to throw me a curveball. It started with whispers, the kind that slide across a high school cafeteria faster than any official announcement. At first, it was talk of strange shapes moving in the woods behind the gym, tall, hunched shadows that vanished the moment someone turned on a flashlight. Some kids swore it was just seniors messing with the freshmen. Others whispered the word beast when teachers were out of earshot. Then came the deer carcass near the football field. The animal had been mauled, ribs split wide like a butcher's display. Teachers called it a black bear, but the grotesque wounds baffled anyone who saw it up close. The rumor blazed through grainy photos shared from phone to phone. I stared at one picture on a friend's screen for too long. The hunched silhouette, the lupine head, everything dragged me back to my kitchen, hearing claws scrape my walls. The others accepted the bear story, but my gut rebelled. I couldn't shake the thought. This was the same breed of creature, maybe even the exact one I'd fought before. If true, the nightmare hadn't ended. It had simply shifted to the woods around the school. But there was more. In the following days, pets vanished across this side of town. New posters appeared daily. At first, cats. They were blamed on strays or cars. Then a dog, bigger than a lab, vanished from a fenced yard. Its collar later turned up twisted and broken beneath the football bleachers. When I overheard a teacher muttering that police were investigating mutilated livestock just a mile from school, my stomach seized. Rumor said the farmer described something massive and wolf-like disappearing into the trees. I told myself 100 times it couldn't be the same creature. But every new story chipped away at the denial. Ava and I had heard it badly. Cut, burned, broken. Still, the more I thought about it, the easier it was to believe something like that wouldn't just slink off to die. It would heal. It would remember. And maybe it would come looking for us. During lunch break, Ava and I sat together in our usual quiet corner near the far end of the cafeteria, away from the noise, away from the endless clatter of trays and chatter of kids who didn't know what was really out there. Ava was scrolling through her phone, her expression tight. When she finally set it down, her brown eyes locked onto mine. and I knew without her saying a word, she thought the same thing. Another animal attack, she said quietly, pulling her sleeves over her hands like she always did when she was trying to steady herself. Farmer, about 2 miles south of here, found 2 goats practically shredded. Police are blaming stray dogs this time. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. It's not dogs. Ava studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You think it's back? It wasn't a question. I swallowed, glancing around to make sure nobody was close enough to hear. I don't just think. I feel it, like the air before a storm. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed on. We both know what it can do. Those wounds we gave it, they might not have been enough. What if it's healed? What if it's still hunting in the area? Ava exhaled, crossing her arms. If it is, why here, around the school? Why now? I think it's because of us, I blurted. The words hung heavy between us, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe it moved here because we hurt it so badly. Its old territory wasn't safe anymore, so it changed hunting grounds. Or maybe something worse. Maybe it knows we're at the school here almost every day, following our scent. Impossible to say. We don't even know what it is. The more I dwelled on it, the less coincidence I saw. The animal seemed smart when it breached my house. A predator like that doesn't forget. It learns, and maybe it holds grudges. If it had survived its burns and wounds, we might have made it even more dangerous by educating it. I met Ava's gaze across the table, her face drawn with quiet worry, and felt cold certainty. We couldn't trust the police. They hadn't believed us then, and they wouldn't now. We had to act before someone got hurt. That burden felt like a lead chain, but I couldn't shrug it off. We were the only ones who knew its power. If it returned for us, the fight wasn't finished. Deep down, I already sensed that it was coming for us again. Ava was still lost in thought. I could tell she wanted to dismiss it, to tell me I was just being paranoid, but the way her eyes shifted toward the trees behind the cafeteria windows told me she didn't believe her own denial. Her fingers drummed anxiously against the table, and then she sighed. You're scaring me, Evan, she admitted, voice low. But the worst part is, I agree with you. Every time I hear another story, I feel like it's closing in, like it's circling us. She pulled her sleeves tighter around her hands and met my eyes, steady despite the fear there. If you're right, we can't just hope it goes away. We have to figure out something before it decides to up the ante. We can't exactly tell anyone, she muttered. They'd just send us to a shrink, or maybe even try to blame us for the dead animals. She tapped her fingers against the table. So what do we do, Evan? Just sit and wait until it starts hunting people again or ambushing us somewhere. I looked down at my tray, where the untouched food was turning cold. I don't know. But if it really is back, we're the only ones who've seen it up close. We can't just go out and hunt it. And we can't ask anyone else for help either. Not without undeniable proof of this thing's existence. Ava gave a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, great. The two of us against a monster that can rip through steel bars. Won't work. We need help. Her sarcasm didn't hide the tremor in her voice. I reached out without thinking, my hand grabbing hers on the table. Something I'd never done before. She didn't pull away. The warmth of her hand sent a rush of conflicting feelings through me. Relief that she was here. Guilt that she was dragged into all of this. And that hopeless teenage longing I'd tried so hard to bury. Ava wasn't just my ally in this. She was the person I couldn't stop thinking about. The one who made the fear bearable. In the middle of all this madness, she still managed to make me feel like I wasn't invisible. She must have seen something in my expression, because her grip tightened slightly. If we decide to take this thing on, we'll stick together no matter what, she whispered. Her conviction sent a chill through me, but instead of freezing, it sparked something deeper, resolve. Thanks to Ava, I suddenly felt ready to face the monster. We weren't just survivors. Together, we'd become something more, joined by experience and bound by a secret. Somewhere in the woods on the town's edge, the creature that once hunted us watched. I felt it in my bones. This time it wouldn't escape. I would make sure of that. Sitting side by side at her desk late that evening, We whispered about every rumor and half-glimpse until an idea began to take shape. We both agreed we needed proof to get the authorities to take action and deal with the werewolf, or whatever this thing was. We needed to collect clear, undeniable evidence, like a high-quality photo that can't be easily discounted. After much debate, we devised a reckless plan: lure the creature to the football field, an open space with no cover, and photograph it from the small, elevated windows of the locker room. From there, we could record every detail without exposing ourselves. The metal door would hopefully protect us if the beast were to notice. The plan sounded simple, but the details felt risky. Biking to the school, carrying 10 pounds of raw meat, and hiding less than 100 feet from the creature, trusting the door for safety. Ava even sketched the layout, marking an escape route through the gym. Fear sped up my pulse, but Ava's determination made me nod in agreement. The next day, we left just before dark. Ava carried a duffel bag lined with garbage bags, filled with packages of beef from her family's freezer. Before placing the meat, I detoured to the control room by the gym. My hands shook as I switched on only the smaller wall lights, avoiding the bright floodlights that might scare off the creature. I wanted just enough light to help our phone cameras take clear pictures. With the field dimly lit, I hurried back to Ava, feeling the weight of what we were about to do. The air was damp, and each step on the dewy grass sounded loud. We whispered nervously, joked to steady our nerves, and scanned the dark for movement. At the 50-yard line, 40 feet from the locker room, we scattered the thawed meat, its smell strong in the warm night. Every sound made my heart pound and my eyes dart to the tree line. Ava gripped my arm at the slightest noise. I realized she was as scared as I was, even if she hid it. Once the bait was set, we retreated to the locker room and locked the heavy steel door behind us. I triple-checked it, pressing my palm against the cold metal, knowing it might be our only barrier from the beast. The locker room smelled of sweat and disinfectant. A leaky shower dripped in the silence. We left the lights off, not wanting to attract attention. Climbing to the narrow elevated windows, we waited in silence, cameras ready. The field and meat piles were visible in the faint glow. Every breath sounded loud as we shared nervous glances, the tension growing. I fought the urge to speak, but Ava leaned close and whispered, "If it shows up, we don't panic. We take the shots, wait for it to eat, then leave through the gym once it's distracted." I nodded, my throat dry, forcing a shaky smile. Our shoulders touched as we waited, tense yet comforted by the presence of each other. Being with Ava, even at this risk, gave me unexpected courage. The night stretched ahead, heavy with expectation. If the monster took the bait, we'd get our proof, and maybe this nightmare would finally end. We had barely settled into our hiding spot when the sound of voices echoed from the gym adjacent to the locker room. Ava stiffened beside me, and I nearly dropped my phone. The door on the far side of the room swung open, spilling a faint line of light onto the tiled floor. Two silhouettes entered, their swagger unmistakable. Troy and Jack, the last people I wanted to see, strode in like they owned the place. They froze when they saw us standing on the bench under the window. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd just move on, but then Troy smirked, and Jack let out a loud, mocking laugh. "What's this? Lovebirds having a secret date in the locker room," Troy said, his voice dripping contempt. "Guess that explains why the weirdo has been so on edge lately." I tried to stand straighter, to say something, but Jack closed the distance, shoving me playfully against the wall under the windows. I tensed up. "Relax, nerd. We're just keeping you company. Don't want you and your girlfriend to get bored. Well, her, anyway. I doubt you'd be able to keep her entertained." The two of them burst out laughing, and before I could react, Jack smacked me hard on the upper arm. The blow knocked me off balance, and I stumbled down from the bench, nearly falling onto the tiles as the two idiots howled with laughter. Ava bristled, her eyes on them, her jaw tight. Surprising myself and the two idiots, I got up and got right into Troy's face, close enough to see the cocky smile flicker for just a moment. In the past, I always backed down whenever the jocks hassled me, shrinking away to avoid making things worse. But now, for some reason, I was barely able to hold myself back, the anger rising hot and wild in my chest. My fists itched to swing, but I forced myself to breathe evenly and keep my voice low, steady. Picking a fight now would only ruin everything, and with the beast possibly close by, the last thing I wanted was to draw its attention to the locker room. So I stood there, face burning, swallowing the humiliation, while Troy leaned back against the locker, flexing his muscular arm and letting his gaze run shamelessly over Ava. "You can do better than this guy, Ava. Why waste time with that little weirdo when you could be hanging with us?" Jack laughed, snapping his gum. "Yeah, come on, chica. Bet he doesn't even know what to do with a girl like you anyway. Why don't you come back to Troy's place with us? We've got a few beers, could show you what it's like being with real men." Heat flooded my face. My hand clenched around my phone. But before I could react, Jack snatched it right out of my grip. "Hey!" I shouted, reaching for it, but he held it high, grinning. "What's this? Taking pictures of the little Latina? Gonna post them on your little nerd blog and pretend she's your girlfriend in front of the other weirdos?" Troy snatched Ava's phone out of her hand with a practiced move, ignoring her glare. "Let's see what you two were up to." He waved it around like a trophy. "Maybe some love notes? Or are you sexting?" Ava lunged forward, her eyes blazing. "Give that back!" But Troy just laughed, stepping back and keeping her away with his other arm. Jack joined in, mimicking my voice in a high, mocking tone. "Oh, Ava, I'm so scared. Make them go away, please." The two of them doubled over with laughter, their voices echoing through the room. I felt sick with frustration and anger. Every insult, every shove, every stolen glance at Ava twisted the knot in my chest tighter. I wanted nothing more than to wipe the smile off their damn faces and drag them out to the pile of meat we had prepared for the beast. Even if I would take a beating in the process, couldn't possibly be worse than the fight with the werewolf in my dad's man cave. Ava was also on the verge of losing her temper, her voice sharp. "You're pathetic, both of you." But they only grinned wider, not showing any intention to leave. Then, without warning, the atmosphere changed. A deep, resonant thud shook the steel door just a few feet behind me. The entire frame rattled, dust sifting down from the ceiling. Everyone, including the jocks, froze, their laughter dying instantly. A second impact followed, this time harder, causing the metal to groan. My stomach flipped, and I knew immediately what it was. Guess we had drawn its attention after all. A guttural growl rolled through the room, vibrating in my chest. It was the same sound I remembered from that night in my house, raw, broken, and filled with hunger. The smell hit us next, seeping through the cracks, rot and death, a suffocating stench that clung to the back of my throat. I gagged, covering my mouth with my sleeve. "What was that?" Jack whispered, eyes wide, the color draining from his face. Troy tried to laugh, but it came out in a brittle tone. "Probably just the wind." Another slam silenced him. This one dented the door inwards, leaving behind a warped bulge. The growl turned into a snarl, and then claws began scraping against the metal, dragging long, screeching lines. The sound cut straight through me, triggering every instinct to run, to hide, to survive. Ava's eyes locked with mine, steady despite the fear. She didn't have to say anything. We both knew what was going to happen. It was here. The thing we'd tried to lure had come for the bait, but instead of devouring the meat, it had noticed us and was trying to get in. Troy and Jack stumbled back, still clutching our phones. "What the hell is that thing?" Troy hissed, panic in his voice now. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. "It's what we were waiting for," I said, my voice trembling but certain. "The thing that has taken the pets and attacked the farm animals. It's here, and it's coming for us." The four of us stared at the shuddering door, the monstrous presence pressing closer with every slam. The game had changed, and none of us were ready for what came next. Troy and Jack bolted immediately for the door leading into the hallway, their expensive sneakers squeaking on the tiles. The moment Troy and Jack disappeared, I lunged for the far door to follow, but it slammed shut, a panicked click of the lock echoing like a verdict. "They locked us in," I breathed. Fury and fear flashed in Ava's eyes. Worse, they'd taken our phones, leaving us with no way to call for help or escape. Another massive blow struck the steel behind us, which was now visibly bent. The door groaned, clearly about to give. Ava and I frantically moved around the corner and hunkered down behind the middle row of lockers as the tortured door finally gave way under the continued assault of the massive predator. The crash of splitting metal rang out, followed by silence heavy enough to make my heartbeat thunder in my ears. Then heavy breathing. It was inside. For the moment, we were hidden, pressed low against the wooden bench on the far side of the middle rows, holding our breath. The shadow of the beast darkened the tiles in front of me as it stepped through, blotting out the light from the lamps outside. Claws scraped against the floor, and each step echoed like a hammer on stone as it made its way into the locker room, looking for us. The shadow seemed to veer off to the side, and I risked a glance around the corner. It was on all fours, bigger than I remembered, or maybe my memory had been merciful. Thick shoulders hunched at uneven heights, one arm longer than the other, the claws on that hand dragging lines through the tile with each step. The smaller field lights I'd switched on outside threw a sickly glow through the open doorway, and that dim light was enough to illuminate its face, broad, elongated snout, and a wet black nose sniffing the air. The fur around one ankle was patchy, and the skin was heavily scarred. The mangled hand caught my eye immediately, 2 digits fused in twisted scar tissue. It was definitely the same creature Ava and I had fought and wounded more than a month earlier. The recognition burned through me even as fear compelled me to retreat back behind the lockers. If we didn't do something immediately, this would be the end. I pointed frantically toward the showers just across from us, silently urging Ava in that direction. She shook her head hard, eyes wide, and jabbed her finger toward the weight room door on the far end of the lockers. Before we could argue further, the beast let out a deep, rattling snarl that froze the breath in my chest. Panic surged through both of us, and without coordination, we bolted. Me diving toward the showers, Ava making a break for the weight room. I slipped on the damp tile, sliding around the corner, just as the beast circled back, slow, patient, savoring the hunt. Water dripped from a busted nozzle, each drop thunderous in my ears. I tiptoed further in, slipping into the far shower stall and hunkering down, hoping the curtain would hide me from the creature. I hadn't heard any sign the beast caught Ava. Momentary relief, but I scolded myself for letting us get separated. That was a mistake. I should have stuck with her. I could hear the creature entering the small cavern with the showers, its claws tapping across the tiles. It was a matter of listening, searching, and triangulating. Each scrape against the tile made my skin crawl. My breath caught as the sound drew closer and closer to the stall where I was hiding. Desperate, I tried to think of something, anything to throw it off, but my mind came up blank. Just as I thought this was it, I heard a sharp noise from the locker room around the corner, metal clattering against tile, deliberate and loud. Ava. She had made the sound to draw it away. The beast let out a guttural snarl, then its heavy steps skittered over the tiles as it turned its heavy form and uneven limbs around, rushing toward the distraction. Relief surged through me, a shaky and overwhelming sensation. She had saved me. I forced myself to wait another moment, then reached out with trembling fingers, easing the curtain aside to take a cautious peek. The shower room was empty, the air still vibrating with the creature's growls echoing from further away. Slowly, carefully, I slipped out of the stall and crept back toward the locker room, keeping low, each step measured, praying the beast wouldn't get to Ava before I did, and trying to ignore the disgusting smell the werewolf had left in the air. As I rounded the corner into the locker room, I caught sight of Ava peeking through the tiny window set in the weight room door, at the far side of the room to my left. Relief flickered for an instant. She was alive, before it was drowned out by a new sound, the guttural growl of the werewolf as it spotted her and lunged. The door shuddered and bent immediately as the creature slammed its bulk against it, claws raking across the metal. Ava jerked back from the window, and my blood turned to ice. I had been in the weight room once. It had only one entrance and only a few machines to hide behind. The beast had Ava cornered. Before I could finish the thought, the door gave way. As the werewolf broke through the door into the weight room, I forced myself to swallow the terror that was choking me and started following it as quietly as I could. Thankfully, it seemed to have forgotten about me for the moment. I made it to the doorway without incident. The weight room was pitch dark, shadows stretching like traps between the hulking machines and weight racks. The beast was standing on all fours in the center of the room, sniffing, its claws dragging faint lines across the rubber flooring. Ava was nowhere in sight. My chest tightened with dread. I knew she had to be hiding behind one of the machines, crouched low and hoping it would pass her by. But the way the monster lifted its snout, scenting the air, told me it was only a matter of seconds until it found her. My pulse hammered as I realized I had to act, and soon, or she would be done for. I quietly approached the nearest rack, not daring to take a single breath, and reached up until my hand found a small hex dumbbell, maybe 8 pounds. My fingers gripped it tightly, and I lifted it off the rack without making a sound. The beast stepped forward towards one of the machines, its lips peeling back into a snarl. It was now or never. Summoning every ounce of courage I had ever possessed, I rose from behind the dumbbell rack and shouted into the darkness. The sound tore from my throat, raw and cracked, but it was enough. The beast spun around instantly, eyes flashing, just as I hurled the dumbbell with all the strength I could muster. To my astonishment, luck carried it true. It smashed square into the creature's face with a sickening thud. The werewolf yelped in pain, reeling back and slamming into one of the racks stacked with plates. The entire frame shuddered, and several heavy plates toppled loose at the top, crashing down onto its hands. The creature shrieked in pain, twisting violently as the metal discs rolled and clattered across the floor. Ava surged forward from the shadows like she'd been coiled there forever. She grabbed the nearest empty bar, no plates, just 6 feet of steel, and swung it two-handed with a scream that started low and climbed until it threatened to shred my eardrums. The bar caught the werewolf across the muzzle, throwing it backwards into the weight rack a second time. In its surprise, the beast even toppled over to its side. More plates fell, this time right onto the beast's head. Confused and clearly in pain, the werewolf reared, claws frantically flailing for purchase. But Ava wasn't done. Pointing the bar like a spear, she surged forward and rammed it right into the creature's mouth, jamming it deep into the soft tissue of its throat. The sound it made wasn't a roar. It was a wet, choking bellow that shook dust loose from the rafters. It desperately clawed at the bar, scraping sparks from the knurling as metal ground against claws. Fluid, dark, almost black, spattered across the bench and floor. Ava turned to me, ready to make a run for it. "Move!" she yelled. "Evan, move!" We ran. We hit the locker room like a storm, shoes skidding on tile, my shoulder glancing off a locker. "Field!" Ava shouted, pointing to the now open doorway, the one that led straight to the 50-yard line. We sprinted, lungs burning, as the beast still thrashed and yelped, crashing into every single machine and weight rack by the sounds of it. Cool night air hit my face like a slap as we exploded onto the football field. "Don't stop," I said, though I was already pumping every ounce of speed my legs could give. The stadium felt endless and wide in the dim light, every shadow a trap. We cut toward the main building of the high school, the low shape of double doors and glass about 200 yards beyond the bleachers. I couldn't believe it. We had made it out of the locker room, alive and well, for the moment at least. As we were about halfway to the school, I risked a glance back and saw the werewolf hit the field behind us, immediately starting its pursuit. The 20-second head start was enough. We ran for one of the side doors, which had a doormat wedged between it and the frame. Thank God for lazy janitors. Ava yanked the door shut behind us, and I immediately turned around and removed the mad, hands shaking violently. The door fell shut, and the electronic lock clicked just as something heavy struck the door from the other side. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The door shuddered behind us, each attack rattling through the frame as Ava and I tore down the narrow side corridor towards the main hallway, the heart of the school. My lungs burned and my legs screamed, but adrenaline drove me on. We were now inside the main building, not exactly trapped, but with no feasible way out either. Our bicycles were several hundred yards in the direction we had just come from. Even if we made it there somehow, we probably wouldn't be able to outrun the werewolf on the road. "Where do we go?" Ava panted beside me. Her hand brushed mine, both of us fumbling for ideas. I tried to think. We couldn't just keep running around the school. Sooner or later we'd be found and cornered again. First we needed a place to hide. Then we had to figure out a way to call for help. We would never make it out of there on our own. Then I noticed something. A thin sliver of light shone under one of the classroom doors further down the hall. Someone was still in here. A teacher, maybe. My heart leapt at the thought, even though it wouldn't really change anything. "There!" I hissed, pointing towards the light. Without hesitation, Ava and I sprinted for that door. Our sneakers squeaked softly against the floor, each sound seeming to echo too loudly in the empty school. As we skidded to a halt outside the lit classroom, I pushed the door open and nearly collided with Miss Wilson, our biology teacher. She had a stack of papers in her hands and nearly dropped them when she saw us barrel in. "Evan? Ava? What on earth?" she began, but stopped when she saw our faces. Her sharp eyes, usually warm and calm, flickered with immediate concern. She set the papers down and raised her hands in a calming gesture as Ava closed and locked the door behind her. "What's happened? Are you okay?" "We don't have time," Ava gasped, her hands hastily engaging the electronic lock of the classroom door, a safety measure for certain types of incidents. "Something's after us," Ava explained. Miss Wilson frowned, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean, something?" Before we could elaborate, the faint sound of metal shrieking echoed down the hallway. The sound made my skin crawl and froze all three of us in place. Then came another heavy impact, and the sound of a distant door giving way. The beast was inside the school. "Miss Wilson," I whispered, "it's some kind of animal. The same thing that's been going after pets and livestock these last few days. We lured it here, hoping to take photos and get the cops to finally take this thing seriously. And now it's hunting us." The teacher stared at me as if trying to piece together whether this was some kind of prank or hysteria. "Evan, Jesus, you're saying there's some kind of dangerous animal in here with us, like a bear?" she asked, voice low. Ava shook her head furiously. "Not a bear. Something else, but just as big, and a lot smarter. I don't know what it is, but it's dangerous, and it's going to get all of us if we don't do something." Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed locked on Miss Wilson's. The look on the young teacher's face told me she didn't fully buy our story, but the fear radiating off both of us was impossible to ignore. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She hesitated only a second before whispering, "I'll call the police." I nodded, heart pounding. "Do it quietly. If this thing hears you, it'll be on us in seconds. That door is not going to stop it." We killed the classroom lights, plunging ourselves into darkness, broken only by the faint light coming through the door's narrow window and Miss Wilson's phone screen as she dialed the emergency number. She pressed the phone to her ear, whispering details I couldn't make out. We huddled down at the back of the room, as far away from the door as possible. As I ran different scenarios in my head, Miss Wilson ended her call, slid the phone back into her pocket, and crouched beside us. She whispered that she had told the dispatcher there was a bear loose in the school. Animal control would be dispatched, but the sheriff wouldn't come. It was a busy night, and resources were tied up. Ava gave a bitter laugh under her breath. "Animal control isn't going to be able to handle a damn werewolf," she muttered. Miss Wilson's head snapped toward her in confusion, brows knitting. She gave a short, incredulous laugh under her breath, whispering, "Come on, you don't really expect me to believe in werewolves. That's not funny. There's no such thing." As if the world itself wanted to mock her doubt, a deep, twisted howl erupted outside in the hallway. reverberating through the entire school. It was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard, and the look on Miss Wilson's face told me she now understood this was no joke. Then, the only sounds in the room were the faint dripping of water from somewhere in the pipes above and the echo of our ragged breathing. The three of us stayed frozen in the dark, listening. A few minutes after the howl, we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, claws clicking on tile, moving through the dark corridor outside. Each step echoed, impossibly loud, as if it were meant to be heard. My ears strained until they hurt. The monster was out there, searching for us. It knew we were in here somewhere, but it hadn't figured out which room yet. We were definitely in trouble. Making it out of this mess alive was a long shot. A few minutes after the beast had seemingly moved on, the silence was shattered by a sudden commotion in the hallway. Much lighter, more panicked footsteps, a crash of lockers, and voices crying out in raw terror. Ava and I exchanged a look. Then I crawled to the door and leaned against it, peering out through the narrow window. My stomach dropped. It was Troy and Jack, flailing and whispering to each other down the hallway. For a heartbeat, I wanted to leave them out there. They had mocked us, stolen our phones, and locked us in with the beast. Hell, they had made my life miserable for years. But as I heard them stumbling past our classroom, desperate and about to be mauled, I knew I couldn't just let it happen. Whatever they had done, I wasn't going to carry that sort of guilt with me for the rest of my life. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door, whistled softly, and waved them over once they saw me. The two idiots didn't hesitate. They barreled into the room, nearly knocking me over, and I quickly shut the door behind them, locking it again. All five of us eased back into the shadows as the strange noises of the beast in the corridor approached again. Troy collapsed against the back wall, shaking violently. Jack slid down in a corner, muttering curses under his breath, his hands trembling. Their bravado was gone, stripped away by raw fear. In the dim light, I could see them shivering, huddling closer to Miss Wilson and Ava like scared children. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the memory of them harassing Ava, or the way they had shoved me and humiliated me in front of her. Or maybe it was just that I had had enough of being the world's punching bag. I stepped forward, raised my hand, and slapped Troy across the face so hard I thought I had broken my wrist for a second. The sharp crack echoed louder than I expected in the hushed classroom. "Shut up," I hissed quietly, my voice shaking with fury and adrenaline. "Give me my damn phone back. None of this would have happened if you hadn't shown up and messed everything up. And now you're cowering here on the floor, crying like toddlers. You're lucky you're still alive. Now be quiet while we try to figure out how to get out of here." The room froze. Miss Wilson's eyes widened. Ava's jaw dropped. Even Jack blinked at me like he didn't recognize who I was. Troy clutched his cheek, his mouth opening, but no words coming out. For the first time, they weren't in control, I was. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the constant clicking of claws outside, interrupted by the odd moan or growl. In that moment, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't the weak, boring kid no one took seriously anymore. I wasn't invisible. I was the one who had faced that damn monster before and almost taken it down. And I wasn't going to let two high school bullies, or even this godforsaken creature, push me around ever again. I could still feel the sting of my hand across Troy's cheek, but instead of guilt, what followed was clarity. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't drowning in fear. I was thinking straight. We couldn't keep running and hiding in classrooms, praying for the doors to hold until someone came and dealt with the werewolf. If animal control did show up, they would just be torn apart by that thing. The creature outside was relentless, and it wasn't going to stop until someone who knew what they were dealing with took care of it. If we wanted to survive, we needed to become that someone and end this then and there. "We can't just sit here," I whispered, my voice steadier than I expected. "It will tear through this school room by room. It will ambush animal control when they get here, and in all likelihood, the cops as well when they finally decide to show up. We need to figure this out ourselves." Miss Wilson looked at me, her eyes sharp even in the dark. What do you mean? How are we supposed to do that? We're sitting ducks here. The chemistry lab, I said without hesitation. It has heavy fire doors and no windows. If we can lure it inside, we can use it as a kill box. Ava's head snapped toward me, her face pale but determined. You're talking about heading out there and getting it to chase us across the entire school building. Are you serious? Not all of us, I said quickly. Just me, Troy, and Jack. I turned toward them, meeting their wide, frightened eyes. You both play football. You're in excellent shape. And I know this school better than anyone. It's a maze of interconnected rooms and hallways. If we move fast and use our heads, we can stay ahead of it, while it wastes time breaking through doors and splitting its attention between the three of us. We just need to be smart about it. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of my own words. Come on, guys. Either we do this, or we'll all die here tonight. The room went still. Troy and Jack's wide eyes were fixed on me, but eventually they nodded hesitantly. Miss Wilson leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. And how exactly do you plan on unaliving something like that, Evan? You teach chemistry, I reminded her. There's got to be something in there we can use. Acid, maybe? Her eyes flickered with recognition. Potassium permanganate, she murmured, more to herself than to us. We have just received a shipment. It's still sitting on a bench in the storage room behind the lab. If we combine that with glycerin, it will go off. Ava frowned. That'll actually work? It will if we manage to get enough of both substances on that thing, Miss Wilson said grimly. It should hurt the creature badly enough to finish the job. If we use acid, it'll hurt it, but won't finish it off. Potassium permanganate and glycerin will stick to fur and cause extensive damage when they react. But we'll need to work out a way to apply it to the beast without getting ourselves hurt. Maybe prepare flasks and then throw them or something like that. I nodded. Then that's the plan. We lead it into the lab, trap it, and hit it with chemicals until it goes down. The idea scared the hell out of me, but it was the only plan we managed to come up with. Troy let out a nervous laugh that died almost immediately. This is insane. You're all insane. We should just wait for the cops. The cops aren't coming, Ava snapped, unwilling to deal with Troy's obvious cowardice. Miss Wilson spoke again, her expression set. All right, but the chemistry lab is on the other side of the building. If this thing is out there in the main hallway, we won't make it there. Evan, if you're serious about this, you'll need to keep it busy for several minutes, so Ava and I can head over there and get everything ready. Me and the boys will take care of it, I said, surprising even myself with how firm my voice sounded. I stood, clutching my reclaimed phone tightly like a weapon. We'll lead it on a wild goose chase and use our knowledge of the school to our advantage. That should give you and Ava enough time to get to the lab and prepare the flasks. This ends tonight. Miss Wilson exhaled and began outlining the details, how they'd split the materials into separate flasks, how quickly the reaction would ignite once they mixed, how dangerous it would be to open the doors and throw the flasks at the beast when it was trapped in the lab. We all listened, Ava's hand gripping my arm so tightly it hurt, but I welcomed the pain. It reminded me of what was at stake. The fear hadn't gone away. It never would. But it didn't stop me. I had a plan, and I was ready to see it through. We didn't waste any time. Miss Wilson squeezed my shoulder once, firm, teacher-steady, and slid toward the front of the classroom with Ava, gathering her master key and getting ready to bolt out the door the moment I gave the signal. 300 yards, she mouthed. Out the door, right? Then left, then right again at the end of that hallway, then about 80 yards to the lab. Ava's eyes found mine in the dim and held there for a heartbeat. Fear, trust, a promise. Then she got into position behind Miss Wilson. I turned to Troy and Jack. We go now, I said. The words came out flat, certain. We proceed slowly, quietly, until we see it. Once it starts to chase us, we separate and lock every door behind us. We only need to distract it for 5 minutes. Then we'll circle back to the lab and lure it in. Whoever it is chasing at the time has to run into the lab, then out the other side, into the storage room, shutting the door immediately. One of us will shut the other door from the main hallway. Jack's breathing was all harsh edges. He shook his head as if to rattle the fear out. Troy swallowed, jaw clenching. For a flicker of time, we were just boys between bells again. Locker doors, shin guards, homework half done. But the hallway beyond the door sucked those memories out like a vacuum. Something entirely different paced out there, waiting for us to show ourselves. I cracked the classroom door open quietly and took a peek outside. Nothing. The faint sound of claws drifted from the west wing, then paused, as if listening. I opened the door a bit more and slid out. The jocks followed, shoulders hunched. Ava pulled the door back, but didn't shut it completely, so she could hear my signal when it was time to make a run for the lab. Troy, Jack, and I carefully moved down the hall towards the noises. I led, keeping low, angling past the trophy case to a service corridor that most students ignored. The school is a patchwork, an old building in the middle, with a newly built satellite containing the science wing. The core of the main building contains administrative offices, the faculty room, and the auditorium. I've spent enough afternoons attending debate sessions and student council meetings to know every single door and corner in there. That was also the reason why I, as one of very few students, had a fob that opened most of the doors. My being a nerd was really coming in handy now. From somewhere deep down the hall came the scrape of claws on tile, the guttural snarl that made my stomach turn to ice. We froze, listening, and then the shape emerged from the darkness, the hunched, lopsided silhouette of the grotesque beast that had been haunting my dreams ever since I first laid eyes on it, filling the hallway with its unmistakable stench. I felt both Troy and Jack stiffen beside me. The moment I saw their eyes, filled with pure, primal fear, I knew I had made a mistake. An old saying echoed in my head, "No plan survives first contact with the enemy," and mine was falling apart that very moment. Jack broke first. The instant the creature's reflective eyes locked on him in the dim light, he let out a choked cry and bolted, sprinting down the hall behind us as fast as he could. "Jack!" I hissed, but he was already gone, his footsteps slapping frantically on the tile until they vanished around a corner. Troy tried to hold his ground for a few more seconds, but it was obvious that the fear was going to win out. He backed away too, then turned and vanished into a side corridor. I knew it was a dead end. Troy had trapped himself before the chase had even begun, and I had no choice but to retreat down the main hallway as the beast approached, leaving the jock to his fate. The beast suddenly moved with shocking speed, but it wasn't stupid. As I expected, it ignored me and went for Troy first, who was now crying and frantically searching for an escape that just wasn't there. The creature bolted down the narrow corridor on all fours, its claws lashing out in a frenzy as it slid towards its helpless prey. I stopped retreating and instead took a few steps towards the corridor, hoping to come up with something to maybe distract the beast and give Troy a chance to slip past. The terrified boy screamed, threw himself to the floor, and covered his face with his arms. The werewolf, unable to stop in time, slammed into the wall Troy was cowering against, which made the first two swipes miss. But it was hopeless. The third swipe found Troy's left arm, leaving deep cuts that ran down from his biceps almost to his wrist. But the werewolf didn't finish him off. Instead, after finally catching itself, it leaned down towards Troy, seemingly playing with him and savoring his fear. As my mind tried to catch up, my eyes fell on the red fire alarm switch mounted on the wall right beside me. I slammed my hand down on the switch. The shriek of the siren tore through the school, echoing off every wall, locker, and door. The beast jerked up, clearly caught off guard, its canine ears perking up as it turned its head back and forth, trying to make sense of what was happening. I saw my chance. Desperate to pull it away from Troy, I stepped deeper into the narrow corridor, shouting and waving my arms. "Hey, over here! Come on!" My voice cracked, but carried. The werewolf's head whipped toward me. We were only about 15 feet apart, its eyes locked on mine. Then recognition. It remembered me. The pain I had caused it months ago when it came into my house. With a deep growl, it lunged, abandoning Troy to his pain. I spun and bolted back into the main hallway, taking a sharp right around the corner while yelling at the top of my lungs, "Ava, now! Run!" The beast slipped in its frenzy, claws scraping across tile, which gave me just enough time to reach the faculty room door to my right. Barely able to control my fear, I swiped the fob across the reader and yanked the door open, slamming it shut immediately once I was in. Like its counterpart on the far side of the faculty room, the door had been swapped for a much more sturdy model during the school's recent security overhaul. It shook visibly, but didn't give as the werewolf's bulk crashed into it. While the werewolf was busy trying to get through the front door, I moved across the room and swiped my fob at the back door. I opened it, then waited, ready to bolt the moment the creature broke through. 20 seconds had passed, and the door still held. This was exactly what I had planned. If I could get that thing to waste time with a few more of these heavy doors, it would give Ava and Miss Wilson more than enough time to reach the science wing and get the chemicals ready. Almost a full minute later, the reinforced door finally gave in with a splintering crack, the werewolf's bulk forcing it open with visible effort. I shouted again to keep its attention, my throat raw, and the beast's head snapped toward me instantly. It tore across the faculty room, scattering chairs and desks like toys, desperate to reach me. At the last second, I slipped through the back door and slammed it shut, hearing the impact as the creature crashed into it. Once more, it began to work the heavy security door, which was just as sturdy as the first one. I turned right, sprinting down the corridor that led toward the auditorium. Like the faculty room, the auditorium had been reinforced as a designated safe space, featuring multiple exits leading in every direction, all guarded by heavy double doors. I was nearly 2 minutes into the chase and had a healthy head start. The moment the beast came out of the faculty room, I slipped into the auditorium as planned. It was completely dark. I headed for the wall on the opposite plateau of the stage, which had 2 exits at the bottom. Depending on how long it would take the beast to get in, I could either go straight for the science wing or do a lap through the principal's office, which was also reinforced. The reinforced doors rattled under the beast's fury for just over 2 minutes before they finally succumbed. After slamming the door on the other side behind me, I took a left, heading toward the principal's office, but my luck ran out. As I swiped my fob at the door, the light flashed red. I should have known better. A student's fob wouldn't open the door to the principal's office. Damn. There was only one other option. The flimsy wooden door at the far end, which led back into the main hallway on the opposite side of the building. I cursed under my breath, making a break for it as I heard the auditorium's doors buckle under the relentless assault. Frustration and the constant wail of the fire alarm must have driven that thing mad with rage, as this set of doors had lasted barely a minute. Or maybe it was learning. Either way, my time was running out. I shoved through the wooden door, its hinges creaking as it slammed shut behind me. I didn't wait. I turned left and started running. The science wing was directly ahead, down the hall, and then over the sky bridge. 250 yards, maybe, but it might as well have been a marathon. Almost immediately, a thunderous crash echoed through the hallway. The werewolf had broken through already. Not even 10 seconds. I glanced back to see splinters flying as it forced itself through the ruined doorway, its eyes locking onto me again. This was gonna be close. I pumped my legs harder than I ever thought I could, the beast rapidly closing in from behind. Doorways blurred past. Safety posters, bulletin boards, and classroom windows. They were nothing but dark shadows in my peripheral vision. The sky bridge loomed ahead, a narrow corridor of glass suspended between the 2 buildings. Beyond it, I could see the open door to the chemistry lab, our kill box. My lungs screamed for air. My legs felt like they'd collapse, but I kept going, the monster still behind me and closing the gap by the sounds of it. I hit the end of the sky bridge with the monster's claws tearing up the tiles right behind me, every muscle in my body screaming for air. The door to the chemistry lab loomed ahead, propped wide open. Inside, I saw Ava standing behind the first bench, her face pale in the dim emergency light. In her hands, she held an Erlenmeyer flask filled with yellow powder, sulfur. Our eyes met for the briefest second as I barreled through the doorway, and Ava pulled her arm back to throw her flask. In one fluid motion, I grabbed the doorframe with my palm and forced my body to take a hard left. Ava didn't hesitate. The flask left her hand the moment the werewolf burst through the open door. The glass shattered against its chest, bursting into a cloud of fine yellow powder. The beast roared, rearing back as the sulfur coated its face and large areas of exposed black skin. It pawed at its face, confused and in pain, eyes blinking frantically. I definitely owed Ava for that one. "Move!" Ava shouted. We retreated to the back of the room, our own lungs burning with the sulfur stink. Miss Wilson appeared at the front door and slammed it shut from the outside while the creature was still distracted. On the bench at the back of the room sat our real weapons, 2 Erlenmeyer flasks each with black potassium permanganate crystals and glycerin, full, sealed, and ready to be thrown. When combined in sufficient quantities, the 2 substances would cause an exothermic reaction. The glycerin would seep into the sharp, purple-black crystals, heat building slowly at first. Then, within seconds, the surface would begin to smoke and hiss before erupting into a brilliant flame that burned with a distinct violet hue. It was the kind of chemical reaction that fed on itself, rapidly getting out of control. If we could coat the beast's fur with enough permanganate crystals and splash the clear, syrup-like glycerin across them, the reaction would set it alight in an otherworldly fire that no living creature could endure. Ava grabbed 2 flasks. I grabbed 2, the glass cool and heavy in my trembling hands. We turned around at the same time and hurled the first 2 flasks at the werewolf, just as it started to recover from the sulfur. My first throw hit its shoulder, the black shards sticking to its oily black fur. Ava's flask, also potassium permanganate, struck its chest. The beast's chest was mostly bare, but the crystals spread out over most of its lower body as they rained down after the impact. The momentary confusion gave us just enough time to grab the second pair of flasks, the ones containing the glycerin. Our luck ran out. I hurled my glycerin flask and managed to hit the shoulder again, but most of the liquid splashed harmlessly across the surrounding benches and the floor. Ava's throw missed altogether as the beast dove toward us, the glass exploding uselessly against the tiles. Out of time and ammunition, we turned and sprinted for the storage room door, the furious creature chasing us every step. We made it into the storage room, slamming the reinforced door between us and the lab. The beast rammed it a second later, the hinges groaning but holding firmly. Miss Wilson swept jars and bottles from the shelves, her hands working with terrifying precision. After half a minute of us staring at the groaning, vibrating door, she finally shoved another pair of flasks toward us, both filled with glycerin. "We have to hit it again," she said, her voice shaky and uncertain. My hands shook, but I forced them steady. No time for elaborate plans. We had to get back into that lab, and fast. The door boomed under another impact. "We split," Ava said quickly, taking the words out of my mouth. "Evan, take the front. I'll stay here and try to keep its attention. Once it starts coming for you, I'll open my door and throw the moment it turns toward me again." I nodded, throat dry. "Got it." Once again, I mentally praised the bureaucrats for the electronic locks I had spent so much time cursing over the previous few months. This maneuver would have been a lot more dangerous if we had to fumble around with actual keys. I slipped into the hallway, circling back toward the main entrance of the lab. My fob trembled in my sweaty grip as I approached the reader. The door had no window, and the sounds inside were muffled, so I could only hope that the thing hadn't somehow heard me coming from this side. I braced myself nonetheless. The light went green. I yanked the fire door open just enough to see the beast inside, still focused on the back door. This was my chance. I slipped into the room quietly, easing the door back into its lock. I was able to close in to about 20 feet before the werewolf finally noticed me. It was a perfect throw. The glycerin flask shattered against its left shoulder, half of the liquid soaking the fur, the other half cascading down its ribs toward its furry legs. The beast bellowed and lunged, claws gouging the floor. I slammed the door shut just as its weight hit the metal. Across the lab, Ava threw open the back door. "Over here!" she yelled. The monster whipped around, rage igniting in its glowing eyes, and charged her. She hurled her flask as it crossed the room. The glass burst against its flank, glycerin spattering over its belly and right leg. The beast slammed into the back door just after Ava had closed it, clearly enraged by the fruitless chase we had been leading it on for almost 10 minutes. Then came a new sound, a hiss, a sputter, followed by a sharp, sudden change in tone. Growls and snarls turned into shrieks of pain and desperation. Unfortunately, we couldn't see anything. For the moment, there was nothing we could do but wait for the reaction to play out. I was back in the storage room with Ava and Miss Wilson. We pressed our backs to the cool cinder block walls, gasping for breath, as the monster's cries echoed through the school. We had done it. We collapsed in the storage room, finally allowing ourselves a moment of reprieve as the beast thrashed in the chemistry lab, seemingly unable to escape its fate. My chest heaved. Ava clutched the counter for balance, and Miss Wilson pressed a sleeve against her mouth to combat the increasingly pungent smell of burned fur and flesh. Then the door shuddered again. We all snapped upright as the metal began to bend visibly. With a splintering roar, the werewolf burst through, its right shoulder completely engulfed in violet flames. The horrible noises this deformed creature emitted in its final throes made every nerve in me want to collapse. Ava grabbed my hand and pulled me back toward the exit into the hallway. Miss Wilson had already retreated, eyes wide. The beast turned toward us, its burning shoulder illuminating its horrible face. Before it could come for us again, some began to rise from its right leg, the reaction between the black crystals and glycerin finally kicking off. Just a second later, another violet flame came to life, quickly spreading across its filthy black fur. It threw back its head and wailed again as the reaction quickly engulfed its entire lower half. But the beast wasn't done for yet. It whirled around and hurled itself through the storage room window. The window was no match for the creature. Despite all its pain, it was still able to run off into the woods right behind the building, crashing through the underbrush with ease. The echoes of its cries lingered for almost another minute, slowly fading into the distance. Then sirens. Red and blue strobes painted the tree trunks as fire trucks surrounded the school, summoned by the alarm I had pulled earlier. Water hissed in the pipes as sprinklers coughed to life overhead. A few minutes later, firefighters swarmed the science wing, quickly urging us out into the hallway. The sheriff himself made his appearance, walking past us and through the smoke into the wrecked chemistry lab. He took in the broken benches, the shattered glass, the lingering flames dying under spray. Then he turned around, head shaking, his eyes focused on us. 3 soot-streaked figures leaning against a wall in the corridor, shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. "Hands where I can see them," he barked. For a second, we all stared at him in disbelief. "Sheriff, wait. We can explain," Miss Wilson began, but he cut her off. "Turn around. Hands behind your back," he said, more firmly this time. We had no choice. We all turned in resignation, nice and steady. "Explain it at the station. Right now, you're under arrest for burglary, destruction of property, and arson." Rough hands steered us into the hallway, past firefighters unrolling hoses and deputies sweeping rooms. My protests died in my throat. The weight of exhaustion smothered them. Ava's grip on my wrist trembled, but she didn't let go. Miss Wilson kept repeating that it wasn't arson, that something attacked us, but no one listened. To them, it was just a burned-out lab and 3 suspects. As they led us outside into the blaze of emergency lights in the parking lot, I caught one last glimpse of Troy being lifted into an ambulance, seemingly unconscious, his arm covered in dried blood. I cursed myself for ever letting Troy and the others walk all over me for these past few years. I had fought and survived a werewolf twice. Being afraid of someone like Troy or Jack seemed almost absurd in comparison. I swore I would never again allow myself to be hassled by these idiots. The following day, after a long night in custody, the police finally reviewed the school's CCTV footage. The images were grainy and blurred, showing only fleeting shadows and the outline of a large animal. The deputies deemed it a black bear, which was consistent with Miss Wilson's earlier description of the animal and provided a plausible explanation for the missing pets and torn-up livestock that had been reported over the last few weeks. I didn't speak up. It would only land me in even more trouble. After some debate, they deemed the fire in the chemistry lab an act of self-defense against the supposed bear and released the three of us for the moment. Shaken but free, Ava, Miss Wilson, and I decided we needed to be sure. None of us would be able to sleep with the possibility of this thing somehow having survived the fire. That afternoon, the three of us, along with Miss Wilson's fiancé, an experienced hunter, followed the monster's trail out into the woods. Broken branches, scorched undergrowth, and deep, uneven footprints made it easy to follow its path. After following the trail for about 500 yards, we came across a huge, fallen oak. Beneath the massive trunk was a large hole in the ground, a burrow. Miss Wilson's fiancé approached first, magnum raised. We all exhaled audibly when his stance loosened and he lowered the revolver. Down in the hole, wedged as far into the back corner as possible, lay the charred remains of the werewolf. But it was no longer recognizable as such, just a blackened heap of scorched fur and flesh, with the odd bone jutting grotesquely through the mass. The stench of burned meat hung thick in the air, turning my stomach as we stared into the pit. For a long time, none of us spoke. Relief warred with disbelief. Ava leaned against me, gripping my hand and squeezing it. Miss Wilson let out a shaky breath and gripped her fiancé's hand. For the first time since that awful night months ago, it seemed the nightmare was truly over. That night, back in Ava's room, the chaos of the last 2 days finally caught up with us. We sat in silence for a while, the dim glow of her desk lamp painting soft shadows. My chest felt tight, but not from fear this time. With more confidence than I'd ever known, I turned to her and asked, "Ava, would you go on a date with me? Like a real date?" Ava looked at me, seemingly stunned. For a moment I thought she might laugh, but instead her lips curved into the warmest smile. "Yeah," she whispered, leaning her head against my shoulder. "I'd like that." I took her hand and squeezed it gently. She didn't pull away. Ava tilted her head and asked softly, "So what do you have in mind for our first date?" I smiled faintly, the answer coming easier than I expected. "We meet at my place, get pizza and energy drinks, and then spend the night scouring the internet for everything about werewolves, dogmen, and strange sightings." She grinned and nodded, her eyes sparkling. "That's actually a better idea than going out. At least we'd have some privacy, in case we end up making out." Despite my newfound bravado, I couldn't help but blush as she said that. Ava just smiled and snuggled up to me. I didn't believe in magic and all that supernatural crap about werewolves and shape-shifting. This thing was a living, breathing creature that must have come from somewhere. If this were an undiscovered species, it meant there were more out there, enough to sustain a breeding population. However, that seemed pretty unlikely. The idea of someone having cooked this thing up in a lab made a lot more sense to me. At least I wouldn't be facing this alone. It seemed that both Ava and I had just found our purpose.